days that we all been writing and talking about, that two teams that train in the same spring training complex are in the World Series, and that's very exciting for a lot. They're even having the watch party tomorrow night out there at the ballpark in the Palm Beach, where fans can go out and sit in the field and infield or sit in the stands and watch the game on the big screen, and that's going to be a big game because who would have expected the Nationals to win both games in Houston and be up 2-0 coming home to play the first World Series game in our nation's capital since 1933? That's just amazing.
Yeah, so let's talk about the economic impact of what it will mean in West Palm Beach this coming year with those two teams being there. Do you think there'll be a lot more energy and more vibrations this year more so than ever, including when the park actually opened up?
I think so. We had a story a couple days ago from our Tom D'Angelo where basically a couple years back when the Astros had won the World Series a couple years ago, the following spring there was definitely a spike up in tickets, and they're speculating that now with both teams being in the series, obviously one of them is going to win, that next year will be the same thing. There'll be a spike up in tickets. So, I think there's no doubt they're going to take advantage of that. And it's, these are teams that, the Astros are going to be good for a while. They've been good for a while. And I think the Nationals, I don't think anybody expect the Nationals where they were back in May. If you had told me back at the end of May when they were, whatever their awful record was, that this team would be in the World Series, I would have taken that bet.
Lewis has a question for you.
Well, no, not a question, but they were 19-31 after their first 15 games, Nick. They were pretty bad. They weren't clicking on all cylinders. Scherzer was pitching well at the time, but we saw he'd soon go down with a back injury, I believe, at the early part of July, even after they started playing well. So, yeah, they were bad, but the narrative that I've been championing is that not only are they this team of destiny, but they kind of remind me of the 2003 Marlins. A young team that fired a manager in Jeff Torborg after a 19-29 start, I believe. You have Miguel Cabrera come up in June, hit the walk-off against the Rays in his first ever game. Hits the home run off of veteran Clemens in the World Series, the same way we kind of saw the stud pitcher that Garrett Cole is challenge Soto, strike him out on 3 pitches, and what does he do? His next at bat, he takes a ball and hits it near the train tracks in Houston. A 20-year-old hitting a shot like that. There's a lot of little ways that you can cut and splice how similar that these teams are, but they do remind me of that '03 Marlins team. With the adversities that they faced and overcome. Let me know if you agree.
No, I think those are great comparisons, and I agree. And you mentioned Soto. Again, before this series, if you're taking bets, you said who's going to be the MVP, you probably would pick one of the pitchers on these two staffs. So right now, it's probably Soto, the kid who's the best player playing out there.
He also turns 21 tomorrow. Shares a birthday with me, so that'll be fun. I'll be celebrating with Juan Soto.
Happy birthday!
There you go.
Birthday.
Thank you, appreciate that. Let's see if he can hit a home run on his birthday. I believe 9 players have done that in the World Series before. I'm not.
That's a good trivia. Who's the 9 players? Do you know?
I'm not 100% sure, but I do remember hearing that. I'd have to look that up, though. You'd have to.
Wow, okay, that's a great, because you think about the odds of that. First of all, even being in the World Series on your birthday and then hitting a home run, that's pretty rare, I would imagine. I'm surprised 9 have done it.
Let me tell you what, Nick. Well, you're developing talent up at the Palm Beach Post. I got one here with the Tribune here that obviously knows a lot about it, too. Who would have ever thought you and I, Nick, many, many years ago, would be in situations, and I know the aging circle of life thing comes into play here, that we're in the process of trying to be more mentors than anything else.
Scott, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. You're a lot older than I am, though. You're old. I'm very young, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay. I'll take your word for it, okay? Yeah.
No, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. You're right.
No, I don't care. You're entitled to interrupt me. We used to do it many years ago. Why wouldn't we do it now? All we're doing is picking up where we left off. So,
we were mentored back in the day. Now it's nice if you can mentor people, and I do the same thing at the Post, and I think it's a wonderful thing that we can do.
Yeah, so tell me, how long have you been back at been with the Post? I know you said you went in the newsroom, but then you were elevated to the sports executive.
Yeah, I came back 5 years to change. When I came back, I was on what they call the bridge team. What that is basically, you're handling everything from news to sports to features to business.
Right.
You copy anything, and you're working. It's not just the Post. It's also PalmBeachPost.com,
right.
The online part of it. You're doing all that. I was working those nights, and then the sports editor, Mark Bradley, actually took a job at the Washington Post, so he's up there now in D.C., and a job came up in last October. And, I'd been a sports editor, as you know, in Tampa, and I'd been a sports editor also in Iowa, and I was thinking, my sports editing days are over, and everybody kept saying, you're going to apply for the job, and I wasn't sure. I said, yeah, you know what, I'm going to apply for the job. I love it too much, and I think I can do a good job, and so I applied and interviewed, and thankfully they hired me a year ago, October, and so, I was pretty much just completed my first year as sports editor down here, but it really has changed so much, Scott, from when we were younger to when I was even sports editor in Tampa, because, it's not like it used to be, and we're doing a lot with a lot less, and a lot less resources, and we don't travel as much, and the paper's smaller, and deadlines are earlier, but you still have to put out a quality product and serve the readers. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, it's funny. I was going to ask you that question, but GMTA, you know what that stands for?
Say it again.
GMTA.
No, what does it stand for?
Great minds think alike. Ha ha.
Oh, okay. I was like, good morning. No, okay. You're right. Great minds think alike.
Oh, come on, Nick. Other than the fact I've gained a few pounds since we were working together, and a lot more gray hairs, we definitely are able to. I think the one thing that's so nice about having you on the program, too, though, Nick, is the fact that when I left the Tribune and I graduated from USF, I covered the Detroit Lions and you covered the Tampa Bay Bucks, and I know we used to see each other twice a year, and I think that's what made it even more interesting. Once upon a time, I used to have to compile statistics in high school, and now all of a sudden we get to pig out at these NFL stadiums, and they get to have other people do it for us. So boy, how life changes.
You're right. That was my point about high school. When you cover high school sports, you have to do everything. You keep your own stats. You're going down to get quotes, and you're walking the field, and it's crazy. You have no replays, and you cover an NFL game. You can cover an NFL game from your sleep, because they really provide you with everything. And if you miss a play, you're going to see the replay about 10 times, and you got stats and play-by-play and all that. So the hardest thing to cover, no doubt about it, are high school sports.
Yeah, Lewis didn't have to worry about that. His first game, by the way, just so you know, with me, has been with Florida Atlantic University, and at least they're able to provide you with a few things. The only thing that Lewis had a problem with FAU was a little bit too much barbecue, right, Lewis?
Well, no, all I had was like a pork roast sandwich or whatever. But it was definitely a fun first experience for me to kind of get in there, and we met one of your writers. I believe Jake Ellman was there. So
Jake Ellman, covers FAU for us. Jake just graduated from FAU, and he's working part time for us as a stringer, and he does a very good job on FAU.
Yeah, very nice to meet him. We got to talk to him a little bit while we were there.
So let's talk about the fact that for a while you were in Iowa. Tell me what that experience was like, being up in Iowa compared to being back in Florida. That's definitely culture shock if I ever saw one.
I could talk about this for hours, but knowing that you spent some of your life in Michigan, which obviously has very similar cold winters and cold weather, I just know, I always tell people when we moved up there, I moved up in the summer to kind of get going, and I was married at the time, and my wife and 2 daughters, they were still in Florida because we had to sell our house, and the girls were starting school. I came back in October to get them, and I left, when I got back to Florida, I want to say it was like 90 degrees the day we drove up to Iowa to move up there. And by the time we got to Iowa, the temperature was in the 20s. It was like a 70-degree difference. I remember my wife at the time looking at me and saying, "Is it always going to be this cold?" I said, "No, it's going to get colder." So the winters are brutal. It was cold. But I'll tell you one thing: the rest of the year, the spring, the summer, the fall is beautiful. Unlike Florida, true change of the seasons. And I got to see life in the Midwest, the different slice of life, and my girls got the experience of that, but I enjoyed it, and sports editor, and like I said, but I always knew I'd get back to Florida, and luckily I am back here, and this is where I want to be. This is where I spent most of my life. My family's here, and as crazy as this state is, and it will always be crazy, it's home, and that's it.
So, all right, Nick, I've got to ask you, because I know a lot of people would like to do it. Tell me who the biggest influence in your career as a sports writer/writer has been.
Boy, I grew up in New Jersey, reading all the New York papers, and I always remember, Dick Young was kind of a nasty. I got to know him later on in life. He was a nasty guy, but I always remember what a great reporter and columnist he was, because he really was one of the first ones to go into a clubhouse and get quotes and work beats and stuff like that. And I figured that's how you cover teams. So, but when I got to Tampa to start actually, growing up or so. I mean, Tom McEwen, who was the longtime sports editor columnist, was always a mentor to me, and someone I could admire, because Tom, no matter how big of a deal he thought he was, I think he was, I should say, he was always down to earth and treat everybody alike, and was always ready to help out young writers and young people. Where a lot of people in that station, there are a lot of people, sports writers and columnists in this country who have attitudes and look down on people and stuff, and Tom never did, and they're just little things through the years that he would teach you about covering a team and how to do things the right way, and I still carry those this day. Yeah,
it's amazing too. When I was working back there those couple years, and of course I got to know Tom as, once again, I covered the Lions for a lot of years, and you're right. Tom was never too big to talk to the little guys starting out, and a lot of sports editors today, but Tom was not that individual. And another guy that I liked working with there was a guy by the name of Joe DeSalvo, Mike O'Keefe, just a few other names that I'm going to throw out there. But Tom, to me, was just definitely one of a kind for sure.
People don't realize that Tom's passed away, unfortunately, a few years ago, but he was the type of sports editor, or especially columnist, I should say, also, who really pretty much ran sports in Tampa, which today, it was unethical and a lot of things that were like gray areas, but he had Tampa's interest at heart, and if it wasn't for Tom McEwen, I will argue this till the day I die, that Tampa Bay would not be the Buccaneers there, or Tampa Stadium, or all the things that came afterwards, the Lightning, because he was very instrumental in getting those sports there, and that was just, these days, those things just don't happen.
Yeah, I've actually heard that too. I think the thing that I always liked Tom was just the fact that he made everybody feel so much better. Now, the one thing that's changed, though, when we started out, and that you and I are both old school guys that are getting acclimated to, is this thing called social media. Nick, who would have ever have thought guys like you and I and a lot of other people out there would have to depend on social media the manner that we do? We don't have the Louis Adil Weisses that were brought up with this stuff. We're talking about Scott Morgenroth and Nick Pugliese, who had to deal with wire services and all that stuff. We're not used to this, Nick.
Well, but the truth of the matter, Scott, this too, is that this is where people get their information to them. Whether it's on Snapchat, or whether it's on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or any other thing you can think of. This is where, especially the young people, that's where they go to get their news. And if you're not on there, you're doing disservice to what you're reporting. So you got to put your stories there and link back to different things and engage your readers, and that's what you do. My biggest regret, I remember when this was starting way back in the early days of the internet, that everybody kept saying what a great thing it was going to be, because we get to interact with our audience, and there'd be some great conversations and back and forth and give and take. And unfortunately, the trolls have taken over. It's where the point where you read an article online, a great article, and you go into the comments, and every comment's a negative comment. They'll find one thing to pick at or make fun of or something, and it's just like, why did this happen? Why did the trolls take over? And that's unfortunate. It really is.
Do you find it sometimes, Nick, that now we've gone to the digital age? You know what I like about the digital age is you don't have to worry about stories being cut and certain contents being taken out now that you have the online newspaper presence out there. Do you find that that's actually beneficial? I realize the editing chore is a bit difficult, but how do you like the fact that now we don't have to worry about cutting as much as we have in the past?
Well, it's good and bad. And I think, to me, online, I like shorter stories and more things like that. I don't want necessarily a very long story online, but there is an audience for that. People enjoy that. But you have to be careful, because you're right. You got that freedom. But then again, some people just go too far, and they write these monstrosity stories that really do not need to be that long, because they can do it. So, there's a good bad thing, I guess, is what I'm saying on that. But yeah, there are many times with the space of the paper where you have to cut things back, and you hate doing that. Now, yeah, you could put the full story online.
I think of all the things that I actually covered with the Tampa Tribune, and I, being a baseball guy, and Lewis is definitely one of the brightest young guys I've ever seen. His baseball knowledge is off the charts. But me personally, I love covering the Tampa Tarpons. I did. Being associated with the Cincinnati Reds, doing some of their fantasy stuff, which Rick Nelson, Mike O'Keefe, Tom McEwen, and et cetera, gave me the freedom to do. And I'll never forget the time, Nick, when, I was trying to get the Tarpons beat. And, there was myself and another one competing, and, O'Keefe and DeSalvo said, you know what, I'm trying to sell myself to get it. And DeSalvo gives me this old Southern look there. You know what, You're the guy I wanted all along to do it anyways. I just wanted to see how far you could go with it. And we had a blast doing it. And little did people realize, though, that for me to stay employed year-round to pay my way through USF, I needed that summer income in order, and I was fortunate to have the tarpons to fall back on.